Hello and welcome to a mathematics lesson on finding a percentage of an amount without using a calculator. Okay, as you can see, there is a do know on the board. I'd like you to attempt the do know while I explain the three outcomes. Okay, as I said, we're going to be looking at finding a percentage of an amount without using a calculator. In order to do that, we're going to go over what percentage means. We're going to attempt to change a fraction or convert a fraction to a decimal and then a percentage. And then we're finally going to be looking at finding a percentage of an amount without using a calculator. Okay, so I'd like you to pause the video, do the do now, and I'll go through the answers shortly. Okay, hopefully you managed that quite simple do now. Writing a shaded shape as a fraction. Hopefully some of you realise that some of these fractions will simplify. Okay, so it's always best practice to write a fraction in its simplest form. Well done, have you got those? Okay, moving on. We're going to look at what percentage means. Okay, lots of you would have covered percentages before, but it's always good to recap. Okay, so percent means out of 100. A percentage is used to write an amount as a number out of 100. So in other words, it's used to write a number as a fraction out of 100. So for example, if I had a fraction that was 41 out of 100, that would simply be 41%. Okay, so percentage means out of 100. Pretty straightforward. On the right here, I have 100 squares, and I've shaded a percentage of them. If you counted these very nice green squares, you would see that there are 38 of them. Okay, so if I was to write this as a fraction, it would be 38 out of 100. Okay, in order to simplify that, we can write that as a percentage. So the number of green squares shaded in this shape is 38%. Similarly, the number of squares not shaded will be 62 out of 100. 62%. Okay, if I added these two numerators together, I'd get 100. If I added these two percentages together, I would get 100. Okay, so just bear that in mind. That's all percentage means, out of 100. Good. So next, a big target question. Okay, I always like to introduce a big target question at the end of the lesson. Hopefully we're going to be able to answer this question. It's a typical question involving percentages. You can see it's a couple of sentences. Martin invests £3,500. Okay, so in other words, he puts £3,500 into a bank as savings. The interest rate is 4.5% per year. How much interest will he receive at the end of 1 year? Okay, so in other words, my job is to find 4.5% of 3,500, and that will be the interest paid Martin at the end of 1 year. Okay, so feel free to pause the video if you want. We will answer this question at the end. Okay, so we've done the first outcome. What does percentage mean? We're now going to have a look at writing a fraction as a decimal and a percentage. Okay, now it's always good practice to be able to convert between fractions, decimals and percentages. Okay, so technically we should all know, I'm guessing, what a half is as a decimal and a percentage. Okay, now in order to convert from a decimal to a percentage, I multiply by 100. Now if you're unsure as to why we do that, there is a link here to a video that explains it. Okay, but essentially if I was to write 0.5 there, because a half is 0.5. In order to convert that to a percentage, I multiply by 100. Okay, so a half is 0.5 as a decimal and 50% as a percentage. Okay, so I'd like to pause the video and have a go at answering the remaining 4 questions. Excellent. Hopefully you got that. These are pretty interesting, but you know it's not that difficult to change these to a decimal and a percentage. We should be able to get at least a few of them. Okay, so a third would be 0.3 reoccurring. So that little dot there means that the 3's reoccur. If I was to multiply that by 100, I get 33.3%. Similarly with 2/3, that's 0.6 reoccurring, or 66.6% reoccurring. And we should really know what a quarter and 3/4 is. A quarter is 0.25, 3/4 is 0.75, so 25% and 75%. Okay. Now it's always good practice to be able to convert these quantities into decimals and percentages. Like I said, there is a link that explains how that's done if you wish to go and view that video. If not, and you got them right, well done. Okay, so we've now done the second outcome. So the first outcome, as a reminder, is what does percentage mean? The second outcome is us writing and converting a fraction to a decimal and percentage. Okay, so please be aware that these are all linked. They're all the same, and it makes your life a lot easier if you can see that. Okay, so a half is just 50%, a quarter is just 25%, or if I was to write this as a fraction, 25 out of 100, okay, which is a quarter. That simplifies to a quarter. Okay, 25 divided by 100 is 0.25. So these quantities are the same, they're just written differently. Okay, good. Now we're going to look at finding a percentage of an amount without using a calculator. Okay, so I'm going to start really easily and try and explain it the best I can, and we're going to move on to some interesting questions. Okay, you can clearly see that that's an interesting question. Okay, so looking at this question here, we're going to find 60% of 900. Okay, now it's always good practice to find 100%, 50%, 10%, 5%, 1%, and 0.5% if you need it. Okay, 100% of a number is just a number. So 100% of 900 is 900. 50% of 900 is 450, because 50% is half of the quantity. Okay, so to find 50%, I divide the quantity by 2. Now, to find 10% of 900, I divide by 10. 900 divided by 10 is 90. Okay, so just to refresh your memories, if I take the number 900, that is where the decimal point is at the moment. If I divide by 10, I move the decimal point one place to the left and get 90. Okay, 5% of 900 is simply half of 10%. Okay, if 10% is 90, then 5% would be 45. So I half 10%. 1% of 900 is 9. I divide by 100. So going back to my 900 here, this is where the decimal is. To divide by 100, I move the decimal point 2 places left. Okay? So to find 10%, I divide by 10. To find 1%, I divide by 100. And remember, you're always using the quantity. Okay? Now, once I've written down these values, I'm able to find nearly any percentage. In this case, I'm looking for 60%. Okay? So I could, if I wanted, take my 10% and multiply that by 6. In this case, I've just added 50% and 10%, because 50% plus 10% is 60%. 50% is 450, 10% is 90, and if I add those two quantities together, I get 540. Okay, so 60% of 900 is 540. And all I've done is I've halved some numbers and I've divided by 10 and 100. Okay, now let's go through this question here. This question is a little more difficult in that I'm finding 45% of 48. Okay, so 48 is a bit smaller than 900, so I've got to put my thinking cap on. Right, 100% of 48 is 48. Okay, 50% is 24. Half of 48 is 24. I'm now going to find 10%, 5%, 1%. Okay, remember that 10% we divide by 10. So this is where the decimal is now. If I divide by 10, I'm going to move the decimal place one place to the left. Okay, so I hope you can see that 10% of 48 is 4.8. I've moved the decimal point from here to here. 5% is going to be half of 10%. Half of 4.8 is 2.4. Okay. 1% of 48. I divide by 100. If I take my 48 and divide by 100, I move the decimal point 2 places left. Okay. So 1% is 0.48. Now, if we were thinking smart, I only need to find 10% and 5%, or 50% and 5%. I don't have to technically find 1%. I don't really need it, but it's always good practice to find them all. Okay, so 45% is 50% minus 5%. 50% is 24, 5% is 2.4, I subtract them to get 21.6. Okay, so please don't be surprised if you get a decimal value. Lots of percentages are decimal answers. Okay, they're not always nice. So, with that in mind, what I'd like you to do is pause the video and have a go answering these two questions. Excellent. Okay, hopefully you at least was able to find 100%, 50%, 10%, 5%, 1%. Okay, and have a think about how we'd get 6%. And especially 2.5%. Okay, so looking at this question here, 6% of 200, 100% is 200, 50% is 100, 10% is 20, 5% is 10, 1% is 2. Okay, and I want 6%. So I've added 5% and 1%. 10 plus 2 is 12. Okay, I've not really broke a sweat over this. It's not difficult maths if you can divide numbers by 10 and 100. Okay, looking at this one, this is a little more interesting in that it's 2.5%. So I've got to go a bit further now. Okay, so again, I'm going to find 100%, 50%, 10%, 5%. Okay, so 1% is where we divide 60 by 100. So remember, that's where the decimal is. I'm going to move them 2 places left. Bosh. Okay, so 1% is 0.6. Okay, now this is new. 0.5% is just half of 1%. Okay, if I half 1, I get 0.5. So if I half 0.6, I get 0.3. Okay, So to find 2.5% or 2.5%, I did 1% plus 1% plus 0.5%. So 0.6 plus 0.6 plus 0.3 gives me 1.5. Okay, and again, it's not complicated maths. If we routinely find all the percentages, then actually getting to an answer, it involves us adding and subtracting. Okay, good. So I've put a couple more difficult ones on there. Okay, again, feel free to pause the video. I'll go through this one now just to recap what we've done, and then I'll let you have a go at these two questions here. Okay, so while I'm talking, feel free to have a go at them. We're going to find 19% of 30. So again, I've found all the percentages. Now, the thing that's different now is that I've got a quantity. If I look back here, they're just numbers. Okay, now I have a quantity. So I have to be careful how I find the answer to the percentage problem. Okay, so I've got to write everything as money in this case, as weight, as money. Okay, so if I look at what I've done with 19% of 30, I've found the percentages. So 100% is 30, 50% is half of 30, which is 15. 10%, if I divide by 100, sorry, if I divide by 10, I get £3. 5% is half of 10%, and this is the one that tricks some people. 1% is 0.3. Now lots of you will write 0.3 there, but try and bear in mind that it's money. Okay, so you can either write 30 pence, or as I've done here, I've written it as pounds. Okay, now if I were you, I'd try and keep it as pounds. Okay, so just be careful as writing money. So to find 19%, I did 10% plus 10% subtract 1%, which is 19%. 3 plus 3 minus 30 pence is £5.70. Okay, so what I'm saying is that you've just got to be careful when we've got units involved. Okay, it's not so bad if they're kilograms or meters or kilometers, but when it's money, you have to write your answer as money. So for example, I couldn't write 5.7 because that's not technically correct. You know, if I was to ask you how much money you've got in your pocket, you wouldn't say I've got 5.7. You'd say £5.70. So when we're dealing with money, we have to write the answer as money. Okay, so the process is just the same. We're just going to be careful how we write it. Okay, pause the video, have a go at these two tricky questions, and we'll go through the answers in a second. Excellent. Hopefully you had a go at them at least. Now, the thing about these type of questions is that they do get kind of mathematically long, but the maths is very straightforward. Okay, it does involve you writing maths, but if you write the maths down properly and carefully, you're unlikely to make a mistake. Okay, so if you look at this question here, 156% of 38, 100% is 38, 50% is 19, 10% is 3.8, 5% is 1.9, and 1% is 0.38. Okay, so somehow I've got to get 156% from this. Okay, there's different ways of doing it. I did 100% plus 50% plus 5 plus 1. So 38 plus 19 plus 1.9 plus 0.38. Remember, we haven't got a calculator, so we've got to be careful how we add these quantities. We should get 59.28 kilograms. Okay, and again, I'm going to say it, be ready to get decimal answers. Similarly, 5.2% of 1850. Okay, so we've got a 0.1% now. So 100%, 50%, 10%, 5%, 1%. Okay, so straightforward. 0.5% is half of 1%. So if I half £18.50, I get 9.25 or £9.25. Okay, but with this question, I've got to find 0.2%. So I've got to be able to find 0.1% and then double it. Okay, so my job is to find 0.1%. And the way I did it is I took that number and I just divided it by 5. Or, if you think about this, if I divide 1850 by 1000, so to find 10% we divide by 10, to find 1% we divide by 100, to find 0.1% we divide by 1000. Okay, so in other words, I move the decimal place 1, 2, 3 places left to get 1.85 or £1.85. Okay, so feel free to pause the video and make a note of that, because some of the more difficult questions will involve you finding 0.1% of something. Okay, so if I add them together, I get £96.20. I don't get 96.2. That's not what I get. I get £96.20. Okay, so again, be careful how you write your answer, especially if it's money. It's got to be a money answer. Okay, brilliant. Now, there is a worksheet that goes with this. It's not actually split into 3 sections. I've split it into 3 sections. There are 2 exercises. Okay, exercise 1 to 4 is pretty straightforward. Finding 10%, 5%, 15% of numbers. The amber, questions 5 to question 9, are more like these questions. Nope, I'm lying. They're more like these questions. Here, no, still lying. These questions, okay, where I'm finding 0.5% of a number, 6% of a number, okay, and the last set of questions, the green question, exercise 2, is just finding percentages of quantities, like pounds, and kilograms, and meters and stuff, okay. So if you attempt the green section, just be careful of your units, okay, because the units are very important. So you can decide what questions you want to attempt. You might want to do a few of the red and then a few of the amber, or a few of the amber and the green, or you might just want to do the green. It's entirely up to you. Okay, but give the worksheet a go and pause the video and we'll go through some answers in a second. Excellent. Hopefully you answered some of those questions. Okay, you can see that some of the answers have units, some don't. Okay, so hopefully all these answers are correct. I'd like you to mark the work you've done and pause the video. Okay, once you've marked your work, there will be a feedback session on Friday. Okay, so if you do struggle with any of these values or you got a question wrong, make a note of it and we can go over it on Friday in the review session. Okay, now please be aware that exercise 2 is kind of difficult, so well done if you did attempt that. Now, just to finish off, we've got the big target question. Okay, and this is our target for today's lesson. If we can answer this question, then we're doing all right. Okay, we've sort of got what it is we're meant to be getting. Now, Martin invests £3,500. The interest rate is 4.5% per year. How much interest will he receive at the end of 1 year? Okay, so essentially what I'd like you to do is find 4.5% of 3,500. Pause the video and give it a go. Okay, now Martin invests 3,500. So for those of you that don't really understand what this means, Martin has got 3,500 and he's put it into a bank account, a savings account. Okay, now the bank pays Martin 4.5% of 3,500 for putting money into that account. Okay, so if you save money, you're going to get interest. In other words, the bank pays you money to save money. Okay, so if we look at the question here, hopefully you can see it. I've got 10%, 5%, 1% and 0.5%. Okay, so 10% of 3,500 is 350, 5% is 175, 1% is 35, and 0.5%, because I need a 0.5, is £17.50, or half of £35. Remember, it isn't 17.5. Okay, it's money. So in order to find 4.5%, I did 5% minus 0.5%. 5% is 175. 0.5% is £17.50, and I subtracted them and I got 157.50. Okay, so the bank will pay Martin £157.50 per year to save £3,500. Well done if you got that. Okay, please remember that we have a feedback session on Friday. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to write them down and I can perhaps go over any issues that you've got in the next series of lessons. Appreciate your time. Have a good day.